This story goes back a bit, to the late 1990s. It was a time of change and new beginnings for Mr. Somsack, who was diligently pursuing his master's degree. To make commuting easier and with limited funds, he decided to share a room nearby the school campus with one of his close friends. Neither Mr. Somsack nor his friend were particularly picky when it came to looking for a place to rent. As mentioned before, they didn't have the luxury to afford a decent unit. Fortunately, finding a unit wasn't so hard as there were so many poor people around, and therefore available units in the rental market were plenty to meet their demands. The place Mr. Somsack and his friend found was a 3-story building. The ground floor was a commercial store, and the room Mr. Somsack and his friend shared was on the top floor, offering a modest yet functional space to rest and study. It wasn't long after they moved in that an incident occurred. One day, while Mr. Somsack and his friend were going out to eat, they saw a man who appeared to be a white foreign man carrying a lot of stuff and luggage, walking past them up the stairs while they were coming down. Mr. Somsack and his friend just assumed he was just a new resident moving in and didn't pay much attention and continued on their way out. The man moved into room number 33, which was right by the staircase. Mr. Somsack and his friend were in room number 32, which was close to the fire escape. Room number 34 and 35 were nearby, with room 35 next to the stairs leading to the rooftop, where clothes could be hung out to dry. As the year drew to a close, Mr. Somsack's friend was eager to return to his hometown for the New Year celebration. He hurried to finish his studies and packed his bags, planning to leave on December 30th. Mr. Somsack, with a few more tasks to complete, promised to follow soon after. On the night of December 31st, the building was quieter than usual. Most residents had left to celebrate with their families. Mr. Somsack was alone in his room, engrossed in his work, when he heard a soft knock at the door, breaking the silence. Slightly startled, Mr. Somsack opened the door. It was the foreign man from room 33, who asked to borrow a needle and thread to mend his clothes. Mr. Somsack lent him the needle, telling him it was okay to keep it and return it later after Mr. Somsack came back from his hometown. The foreigner agreed and smiled gratefully, thanked Mr. Somsack, and left. Mr. Somsack closed the door, continued to pack his bags, and prepared to join his friend for their New Year celebration in their hometown. A week after New Year's, Mr. Somsack returned from his hometown with his friend. On their way back to their apartment in Bangkok, Mr. Somsack's friend's phone rang. It was another friend of theirs inviting them to hang out in the area nearby. The two decided to join their friends, and the night quickly filled with laughter and clinking glasses. As the clock struck 10 p.m., Mr. Somsack began to feel unwell and decided to head back home, leaving the others behind. Mr. Somsack took a motorcycle taxi cab and arrived at his place around 11 p.m. As he was walking up the dimly lit staircase, he noticed a foreign man walking down the stairs. The man smiled at Mr. Somsack, and Mr. Somsack also smiled back with a polite nod, but without any conversation. Mr. Somsack just thought he might be going out to eat. When Mr. Somsack entered his room and tried to turn on the lights, they flickered but didn't stay on. Being friendly with the security guard, who Mr. Somsack often bought coffee for, he called the guard to ask for help with the light. The guard hesitated, but then told Mr. Somsack that he would leave a ladder and a light bulb on the landing between the second and third floors. Mr. Somsack was puzzled, but agreed. Soon, Mr. Somsack heard the guard shout from below, informing him that the ladder and the bulb were left on the landing, and he could pick them up and fix the light himself. Curious and slightly annoyed by the guard's reluctance, as it was part of his job to maintain the building, Mr. Somsack went down to get the ladder and the bulb and decided to ask the guard in person why he couldn't come up. Instead of answering directly, the guard glanced around nervously and asked Mr. Somsack if he had noticed anything unusual. Mr. Somsack shook his head and replied that he hadn't, as he had just returned from his hometown. The guard then pointed out that in front of room 33 there were offerings, a candle holder, and a thread tied from the door to the candle holder, which was a symbolic ritual to protect the household from negative energies and evil spirits. The guard revealed that the foreign man in room 33 had died several days earlier. Mr. Somsack felt a chill run down his spine as he recalled the man he had encountered on the stairs. The guard continued to explain that the man had died from a heart attack, and many residents had seen the ghost of this foreign man walking around and seemingly searching for something. Other tenants nearby had moved out because of this. Mr. Somsack argued and shouted out, "But I just saw him. He was walking down the stairs." The guard's face grew even more grave as he said, "I wasn't the first to witness and say that." Shaken and filled with a mixture of fear and disbelief, Mr. Somsack returned to his room. As Mr. Somsack climbed the stairs with the ladder and bulb in hand, his thoughts were consumed by the eerie encounter. He couldn't shake the image of the smiling man. When he reached his floor, he cautiously approached room 33. The offerings and the thread tied to the candle holder stood out starkly against the dull, worn door. Taking a deep breath, Mr. Somsack returned to his room and fixed the light. The flickering finally stopped, and the room was bathed in a warm, steady glow. Yet, the sense of unease and fear remained. That night, as he lay in bed, he couldn't help but wonder if the man he had seen was truly a lost soul, wandering the halls in search of peace. The next morning, Mr. Somsack and his friend decided to move out immediately. They hastily made arrangements to stay with a friend who lived nearby until the end of the month, when they could officially move out and get their deposit back. Before leaving, Mr. Somsack approached the caretaker to ask about the unsettling incident. The caretaker revealed a chilling tale. The foreign man had left his passport at the office, asking them to process some paperwork, but never returned to collect it. After a few days, a foul odor prompted them to check his room, where they discovered he had died from a suspected heart attack. Disturbingly, several residents had reported sightings of his ghost, wandering the halls and crying as if searching for his lost passport. Haunted by these eerie revelations, Mr. Somsack and his friend hurriedly packed their belongings and left the building, vowing never to return. The caretaker later confirmed that the rooms remained sealed off, as no one else dared to stay in them. The ghostly presence of the foreigner continued to cast a long shadow over the building, leaving it eerily quiet and shrouded in mystery.